Tom Petty sheds the Heartbreakers and embarks on a solo career. He finds the unexpected secret sauce in co-writer and producer Jeff Lynne. Full Moon Fever coming your way next. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, the home base for music and movies for the past 3 years, Eric. Right? 2021, 2022, and 2023 is quickly coming to a close. So we'll be starting year number 4.
Craziness. Yeah.
Is that insane or what?
It is.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought? I mean, we've said it before. The statistic is that most new podcasts, if you make it past your 7th episode, you're lucky. A lot of people kind of flame out after 7 years, but
you guys have the endurance, man.
Yeah, we realize this is not a sprint; it's a marathon, and we are here every week for you, and we love it. We love doing it, and that's the main thing. Is we have so much fun, and the guests just bring so much more to it that really kind of makes it fun to kind of hear other people's perspectives, especially on an album like this. Because I think Eric knows how I feel about the album. I know how Eric feels about the album. So this would be a pretty boring show if it was just us. So I think it was important to get somebody in on this as well. So none other than Mr. Christopher Clark making his return appearance.
Good to be back. I'm glad I'm back.
Oh,
it's awesome.
He brought his encyclopedic knowledge the last time he was here. He just brought the prog, Eric, right?
He did indeed.
Yeah. He did.
Yeah. That's usually my area of expertise. This one I actually had to study a little bit on. Go back and read a little bit. Yeah. So
yeah, when it comes to prog, he's like Thor with Stormbreaker, just dropping the lightning bolts everywhere. He really kind of, which was great. So I'm glad that he's joining us for Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever. So let's get into the stats, and then we'll start the discussion. If you're new to the show, we kind of give some statistics, some technical knowledge. Then everything else is opinion and speculation, rumor, fan theory, and some conversation as well. A little bit of everything we throw in, right, Eric? We kind of we dump it all in, and then you're listening, you sort it out. It's kind of like JFK. We're like the JFK of podcasts. Like we give you all the theories, and then you figure out which ones
I'm surprised you didn't ring the bell during the introduction.
No, I'm only gonna ring it once.
I was gonna say I have to ring this at least once and then move on because
heaven forbid we let the year go out without talking about Jeff Lynne one more time.
One more time. But yes, thank you for bringing up the bell. I'm only gonna ring the bell once. Otherwise, it would get redundant and it would lose its appeal too. It's nice when you when you hear it occasionally. It's for the people that have been listening, they know what the bell means. For the people that don't, you're gonna have to figure it out. And you'll only get one hint to figure out what it is. So here we go. This was released in April of 1989, produced by Jeff Lynne with Tom Petty and Mike Campbell. Songs were written by Tom Petty, but 6 of them were co-written by Jeff Lynne. There were 5 singles released up from this album. I Won't Back Down hit number 12. Running Down a Dream hit number 23. Free Fallin' hit number 7. A Face in the Crowd hit 46, and You're So Bad didn't chart on the Billboard popular charts, but it hit number 5 on the Rock Tracks chart, which is a whole separate thing. The album itself went to number 3 on Billboard and 5 times platinum. So that's pretty nice. I think that's a nice stat and a nice number of sales for an album like this.
Also, was also nominated for Grammy of the Year in '89.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of great things were happening, and you know what, we should ask you to check out our Traveling Wilburys episode as well, because that got is connected to what was going on in the events. We're going to rehash just some of those events, not many of them, but it's important to set the stage with what was going on from 87 to 91 with this group of people, this kind of collection of artists that were working together. So yeah, suffice it to say, Eric, we were on this from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. We did an episode on Wildflowers, which is my preferred album by Tom Petty. But yeah, I mean, the trajectory of how he became an established solo writer, I think, with Wildflowers couldn't have happened, I think, without an album like this, and having the opportunity to work with other people and kind of have fun with it as well, right? I mean, just kind of diving in, making famous friends, which of course didn't hurt.
Nice benefit,
nice to be sure. But on the other hand, it's but I think it also developed him as the Heartbreakers sound is pretty established. We pretty much know what the Heartbreakers bring. He wanted to try new things, and I think this album is kind of a celebration of that as well. I mean, it's more a nod to all of his heroes, and I'll get into that, but
there's a lot. Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points there. This is where the story begins of Tom Petty, as a solo artist, of him kind of branching out. And you think, and a lot of people think, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band and Bruce Springsteen doing solo work without them on there? Yeah, this is the same thing. What's the difference between Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Tom Petty? It's still the same guy, and he's the front man. So, Chris, what's the difference?
I mean, to me, the one thing that I would say, and it kind of, and before I even talk, I just want to give shout out. I went and I looked up. I read a book by Warren Zanes called Tom Petty: The Biography. And there's a great documentary by Peter Bogdanovich called "Running Down a Dream" that everybody should check out.
It's like 4 hours.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you might want to break it up a little bit, but
warts and all too. That documentary they don't gloss over.
Really. No, and both books went into real detail about Full Moon Fever. Both resources rather went into detail about Petty. And the one thing that I can say is that he learned how to make a record instead of just like banging it out with a band and doing it over and over again until they got the right take. Jeff Lynne kind of showed him how to build a track and how to, get the right take and have your material together instead of just like working it out in the studio, but building it to, be a good, building it in a way like using the studio as a resource instead of just we're going to lay it down and see what happens. And the results speak for themselves. They're great tunes.
Yeah, that thank you for bringing it up. That's a great contrast. The way the Heartbreakers used to record is pretty much live in the studio. Their main producer was Jimmy Iovine, and they would literally perform the song all together pretty much and record it hot. They would record it live and they would go through it until they got till they got everybody got it right and he got the great track, and then they would mix it. And a lot of musicians record that way. Here, the thing with Jeff Lynne is much like some of his heroes, Brian Wilson and others, he's a song architect. He doesn't work that way. He records things one piece at a time and builds it almost like a recipe. So he's got all the individual ingredients that he records and then brings it together and then adds little things. And so, that's a very different way of recording. But if you're looking to strike out on your own, it's probably a good thing to learn. Like you said, because I'm going to really brush with broad strokes. It's easy to get everybody into the room together, rehearse the shit out of something and play it and record it. And you've pretty much, you're looking for that one great take, but you're getting it all done. This way of recording is a little bit different. You're kind of building and you're seeing what fits and you kind of have to have things almost kind of thought out in your mind a little bit more. So that's a great analogy. And that's what Tom Petty was looking to do. He was looking to kind of strike out on his own, much to the consternation and the documentary. The Heartbreakers weren't too thrilled with this, except for Mike Campbell. Mike Campbell is the ride or die of Tom Petty.
Yeah, they were. I mean,
he's with him through thick and thin. Like probably his greatest partner and collaborator was Mike Campbell, just because Mike Campbell was just so, always had his back. But the other Heartbreakers, Eric, right? They weren't too thrilled with.
Not at all.
They didn't understand why is this why is this happening? Why do you need to do this where it's always been Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers? And what is the difference? Why do you need to do that?
Well, it's very much a band. It was a family. You can't break up the family. They can't break up the sound. I mean, the way, and of course, the way Jeff likes to do things is do things one thing at a time, which could be very tedious, frustrating,
and he's not worried about egos either.
Right, guys are looking to play, man. They're looking to get together and do their thing. They're very much an equal, or at least they thought they were partnership. But obviously, Tom wanted to, establish who, who the leader is, I guess, or kind of step out of that a little bit. One could argue that maybe the ego did get to him. Maybe him hanging out with all these famous people got to his head, a little bit. You could see it that way, or at least they did.
Or maybe Petty, and it's not it's funny because his name is it's Petty, but he wasn't being petty. By branding this as a solo album, this allows him to break out of that mold and say, yeah, I'm going to, that's great for the Heartbreakers. That's a good way for the Heartbreakers to work, even though going forward they would use Jeff Lynne on a Heartbreakers album. But
which they hated even more.
They really did not like it.
Yeah.
The follow-up Into the Great Wide Open that was done by Jeff Lynne, and the Heartbreakers. And you know what, Chris, I find this hard to believe that these people, these band members, were just not open. They were so rigid in how they thought about things that they were not open.
Well, I mean, and
to a new way. I mean, it's not like this was a new way of recording that Jeff Lynne invented. This was just the way he did it, and plenty of other artists did it. So, why do you think the Heartbreakers were so just unwavering?
I mean, from the way that I read it and the way that when I researched it, it seems like the way I took it was is almost like they didn't have any input into how the record was being recorded. It was more like, you're going to come in and what I need you to do is bang out, a G chord for the next 4 bars. Or when you come in, I just need a rock and roll beat for, in 4/4 time. And it wasn't so much we're contributing to the album. It's just we're musicians on a Tom Petty record. And it wasn't so much a band record. And that was really kind of the vibe when they recorded Into the Great Wide Open. And then when it came to Full Moon Fever, I think part of it was that they were kind of blindsided by it. And then kind of reacted badly because they weren't told what's happening, and all of a sudden he's out making a record with Jeff Lynne, and stuff in the band was already tense at that point. And Stan Lynch, who was the drummer, it was almost like he created this us against them vibe in the band, and so he almost seemed like, the way I read it, that he almost poisoned the other guys in the band, but against Petty and Campbell, because they were off doing the solo record, and it almost seems like he kind of put this idea in their head, he's looking to move on without us. And which is why when Wildflowers comes together later, he's the only he made it very clear that he didn't want to move on with Stan Lynch. Stan Lynch wasn't going to be on Wildflowers no matter what. And that was kind of
and Stan Lynch didn't want to play any of the stuff live. He's like, it's being in a cover band, which is just absolutely ridiculous, because Tom Petty has done cover songs, so Stan Lynch is playing other people's music. He really was. I mean, he must have really taken it personally, Eric. Right? I mean, that's why I think that to have such an extreme reaction, I think it goes beyond grumpiness. He must have really been hurt by this somehow.
Absolutely. Like I said, it was very much a family. It was, these guys came. They were supposed to. All of them were through. They went through thick and thin together. And to have this, sudden change. I mean, it's not to say that he wouldn't be the first time he tried something different. You think of Dave Stewart, working with him, that was totally out of left field. What did the Heartbreakers think of that? Because that was just not something that they ever did before. And nothing's really mentioned about that per se, but I mean, but it's
true.
You always have to, there's nothing wrong with trying to change, to try new things. I mean, and these guys should have been a little bit more supportive of that, I think, and tried themselves. I mean, they could have stepped up and said, "Hey, all right, well, what could we bring to this?"
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like that's the way it went. Right. It seems like they were just told what to do. Jeff kind of just ushered them out of the room. You did your part, now get out. And it's and that's another thing they're not used to either. Is they're used to hanging around the studio and just and having all that atmosphere, and it just didn't happen this way, and it was just so, But Lynch, he was very vocal. I think he was the most vocal,
and I think part of it too is that he's actually a songwriter in his own right, and he didn't ever. Tom Petty never came to him and said, "Hey, man, you want to write some tracks?" And and Petty's point of view was, "You never came to me and said, 'Hey, man, I've got some of this stuff.'" And and at the same time, Stan Lynch is writing songs for Don Henley. And, he had tracks on the End of the Innocence record. That year, you had Stan Lynch having songs on another album nominated for Album of the Year, at the same time that the Wilbury record and Full Moon Fever were also nominated. So, you could see where he might feel like his talents were almost being ignored by Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne in the whole process.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting. So there, and to kind of, put the cap on it too, the album the last Heartbreakers album that came out before this was 1987. It was called Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, and it tanked. It had the song Jam in Me, which I really liked. It was co-written by Bob Dylan. And the Heartbreakers were dominating MTV. I mean, they were all over the place, but Let Me Up, I've Had Enough really just kind of, it didn't even go platinum. It sold it went gold, like 500,000 copies. So it really just didn't do a lot. So I think, that this was probably on the horizon for Tom Petty of, I need a release. I need some type of other outlet in order for the Heartbreakers to go on, probably. I think that's, not that they were going to explode, but I think, Petty was probably like, yeah, you know what? I got to try something different. So, and this all happens in the whirlwind. The story goes, I believe that, Tom Petty was at a traffic light, or Jeff Lynne was at a traffic light, and Tom Petty pulled up, and they were next to each other, started talking, and then he went over to his house, and something about Tom Petty had to go get a baseball glove for Thanksgiving or something for one of his kids. So he went out.
Yeah.
Jeff Lynne was in the next car over. Hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to work? So, there was a communal aspect that was going on because Jeff Lynne had just come off of producing Cloud 9 for George Harrison, which was George Harrison's comeback album. I mean, he was, as much as people make fun of Jeff Lynne for bringing the ELO sound to things, that's exactly what George Harrison needed for Cloud 9, was just someone who understood and could bring those light flourishes to George Harrison and make his album really accessible. And it just kind of took off. So then Jeff Lynne started working, Brian Wilson in 1988 on a song, Randy Newman in 1988. So 1988 also is when Petty and Jeff Lynne start developing some tracks. Then the Traveling Wilburys happened. So they actually put aside what they were doing because they joined they joined George Harrison, Dylan, and Roy Orbison in the Traveling Wilburys. And that project, they saw through to the finish. And then Jeff Lynne goes to work on Mystery Girl with Roy Orbison. He does 3 tracks from that album and then returns with Tom Petty. And there's Del Shannon in there too, which I want to talk about a little later. So he was very busy in this little span of time, Jeff Lynne.
And then very shortly after Full Moon Fever, that's where he goes into the Great Wide Open, which not as big as Full Moon Fever was. That was when I was really becoming aware of music, and that record was everywhere. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how Into the Great Wide Open, the track, we got sick of it because it was on MTV so often.
Yeah. And the video was so long,
and it was a
that
video
was that was the one with Johnny Depp and Faye Dunaway, and it was just epic thing. And it played incessantly. I liked Learning to Fly much better from that album. But what you get here, on Full Moon Fever, is just it's a great sounding album. We, Eric and I and our other guest Rob, we just did Pyromania a couple of weeks ago, and we were lamenting the influence of the producer, where the producer can, almost overtake the project like Mutt Lange did in Pyromania. This is a similar situation where the producer has a great influence over what's going on, but the results, and I think using some restraint kind of helped shape Tom Petty's sound, Eric, right? You draw the contrast, between Mutt Lange was really, we talked about how it was overproduced, right?
Yeah.
How he was really in everything, where this, you've got those Jeff Lynne elements, but this is still solidly a Tom Petty album.
Well, it needed to be. You couldn't, you can't overproduce an artist like Tom Petty. It's just, the overproduction of Jeff Lynne, and he would be from time to time, critically panned, especially his output with ELO in the 80s, very extremely overproduced. The sort of sequencers and the keyboards and all this,
I love it.
Noise and stuff like that. So, but critically, I mean, producers were not too fond of that. In this case, it could have been that, but it wasn't. He knew enough to kind of, scale it back, and he knew enough just to give it just a little bit of that what was needed, and to give it some life and to give it some sort of eccentricities, if you will. I mean, it just kind of, you think of like Facing the Crowd, and there's that, that stick, he's hitting the and it's just constant throughout.
Yeah, the two wooden dowels.
That's a classic Jeff Lynne thing, technique. He's always got that sound. There's something, like a certain sound,
extra bits that he puts in that
it brings attention to something, right? I think of Secret Messages. That's what he pretty much said about that song. He goes, the reason I did that song and the reason what it is what it is because I wanted to get people's attention, with all these weird, like, sort of background noises, and very much Beatles influence, of course. And, but was that something that, people were pretty more straightforward, I think, in the 80s, and a little bit more simple. And he was still trying to do the lush thing, but with keyboards, with synthesizers, and the tools of the day. And I'm glad. I mean, with Petty, it was like it was just enough.
Yeah,
and I think
gave it a certain sound, but it was good. Yeah,
and I think part of that is the way the record came together. It kind of went from, "Hey man, do you want to write some tunes?" And then Petty just wanting to get them down, so they went to Mike Campbell's studio, which was like I think in his bedroom or something like that.
In his garage.
It was like it was like super loose, and I think the looseness of the sessions kind of lent it to where they weren't trying to force anything. And so even though it was Jeff Lynne's recording methods and his style, it was still had that, loose garage rock vibe that you would kind of almost expect from Petty to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think Eric, I think you hit the nail on the head. You said you can't or you shouldn't overproduce Tom Petty because he's got he's got that roots Americana, kind of stripped down rock sound. So what would it be if he swung the pendulum all the way? You're right. The restraint, it makes this album very tasty.
Yeah,
I think this is an easy album, right? This album is so easy to listen to.
It is, and I think the emphasis, they kind of leaned into wanting to do an old fashioned type of sound to bring back those early. Like I said, I mean, there's flourishes of Del Shannon. There's the Byrds. There's in a way, Petty got to be able to honor these people that he loved so much, and Jeff too. I mean, they're both fellow fans of some of these people, and to kind of go back and make a record that kind of sounded a bit antique, but yet new at the same time. Because of the tools of the day, it worked.
The callbacks. The callbacks are there. Yeah. There's the Buddy Holly. I forget what it's called, the Perry Diddle or something in the Apartment song where it kind of breaks down and it's almost like the Peggy Sue shuffle there. There's callbacks to Bo Diddley, and of course there's a Byrds cover. I mean, when Tom Petty was first starting out, he was famously compared to Roger McGuinn. They said he sounds a lot like Roger McGuinn from the Byrds with that whine, that kind of, I don't say whiny vocal, but there's a certain vocal style that Roger McGuinn had, and Tom Petty was kind of put into that box as well. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, when Roger McGuinn said, I don't remember recording this song because he thought
ended up covering it himself.
He paid homage to the Byrds, and when Eric, you put it that way, you really, I never really thought of it that way. I always thought about those influences individually, like, oh yeah, this, here's a Byrds song, and then here's, this has got that Buddy Holly thing, but when you I never really thought of it that way, that this is kind of an assemblage of that kind of stuff. Even You're So Bad, it's just kind of quirky, and all these songs just have a unique identity, but they're not copycats of things. There's a wink and a nod.
It's a paying respect to your influences without like completely aping them. And even I always thought Love Is a Long Road. Every time I hear that opening, I think of The Who. Like I even think there's like a nod to The Who to some degree with those power chords, the power chords in the opening of that song.
Well, yes. Yeah. I think that one critic said that it was I think Rolling Stone, the original review of the album, said that that was probably the single most overproduced song on the record. He kind of panned that track as Jeff, doing his thing, but it's great. Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, everything on this is great. I mean, the album clocks in under 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's concise.
It's got 12 songs on it, so these are these are pop songs that are meant to kind of, you know, and that's the beauty that Jeff Lynne is good at that. He's good at getting you in and getting you out, but leaving you with a lot to think about. You think about all like, oh my God, there's 12 different songs on here and each one is something different. And that's the beauty of Jeff Lynne is, you know, it doesn't get repetitive. He can bring a different, you know, a different perspective or different tools and tricks to each one. Like, you know, like Free Fallin' was the first one that they worked on. And Tom Petty had the thing is like Free Fallin'. He goes, I don't know how to fit that into the chorus. And Jeff Lynne is like, just sing Free first and then sing Free Fallin'. So it's, you know, free fallin', like just that little adjustment kind of got Tom Petty out of the quagmire that he was in. And that kind of spur, you know, it's like, okay, this is, you know, I think it excited Tom Petty to have a collaborator like that, as well as a teacher, like Eric said, to kind of show him the ropes, give him the producer school, be involved with the Wilburys, be involved with all these other people, have those experiences. And then Tom Petty grows from there, right? He goes into Wildflowers and he grows as an artist, and the Heartbreakers mature, the Heartbreakers stay together, and they weather the Jeff Lynne storm into the great wide open, right? They, you know, like they get through it, but they come out on the other side and they continue to, you know, continue to flourish. So, you know, I think this, you know, the grand experiment that Tom Petty was thinking about, it paid off. It was a gamble that I think, you know, the Heartbreakers maybe didn't understand.
And really,
but it was what they needed.
And if you look at that record, I mean, if you look at Full Moon Fever, it's like at a point where when you get past that record, so many things happen because that record was recorded. You know, MCA didn't want to release it when it came out, so he signed a deal with Warner Brothers that gave him the deal that made Wildflowers. Rick Rubin was so enamored of Full Moon Fever that he made a point to want to work with Tom Petty, and that's where he stops being solely focused on metal and hip hop. And then you get Scott Thurston in the band, and you know, if he didn't work with Rick Rubin, he wouldn't have worked with Johnny Cash, and all of these things that you could trace back to if he hadn't recorded Full Moon Fever, the sequence of events that happened to him for the remaining 20 some odd years of his career don't take place.
Yeah. Side note: Scott Thurston looks like Lance Henriksen. Scott Thurston became he kind of became a member of the Heartbreakers, but he was like a touring guitar, like kind of everyman. He was like a clutch player. He would play whatever needed to be played. Scott Thurston, but eventually he kind of became. They welcomed him into the fold.
Yep.
Like Chris said, this was primarily recorded in Mike Campbell's garage studio. You know, so yeah, there's. So this wasn't in a lush studio. This was kind of like home brew, almost like the Wilburys. The Wilburys was recorded in Bob Dylan's house, but he had more of a functional studio. He had like a booth and everything. But still, there was this aesthetic that was going on between these groups of people. Of, you know, they all make an appearance on Full Moon Fever. I mean, you know, George Harrison is on I Won't Back Down. Roy Orbison is backing vocals on Zombie Zoo. So you've got these people just kind of working and kind of hanging out and being available when needed, just to kind of come in and have a laugh and do it. And that's and I think that's what's in the grooves, is just the ease of this album. It doesn't sound forced. It does, even though it's well produced, it doesn't sound like they're trying to force an idea. It's just like you said, these songs just kind of roll off. They come and they go.
Yeah, I mean,
they go on to the next one.
He's definitely having a lot of fun with it. The songs are quirky enough, and you know, to reiterate the whole sort of like anti Jeff Lynne thing. I mean, it was just sort of like point is that he invited the band to play on it, right? He didn't have to do that. He could have just went off and did this with Jeff. Jeff is fully capable of playing bass, of playing keyboards, of just filling in those parts. Could have hired like another drummer, you know, to do this, and you know,
they did.
I was going to say, yeah,
did, but I'm saying, but like if you hear about like in the the documentary, you hear about how Howie Epstein was like, I don't want to fucking play on that song. I don't like that song.
Yeah.
And it was Free Fallin'.
It was Free Fallin'.
Like, he goes, all right, you don't need to play on it then. But, you know, it's
Jeff
your
Lynne's
loss.
like, I'll play bass.
Yeah. So it's kind of sad that, you know, but the point, like, you know, it could have been a full-on true solo record, you know, but wasn't. You know, they were there. The spirit, you know, and they just
he wanted them there. He just wanted to do things differently and try something else. And and this way it was out technically or officially outside of the Heartbreakers. It's saying, okay, I'm not trying to, again, it would happen with the next Heartbreakers album, but he wasn't trying to force this on him. He said, listen, I want to do this. And yeah, I don't want to make you guys do this. I want to try this, but you're welcome to come in and play and participate within these guardrails, within this sandbox of how we're going to do it. You're going to come in and play your part because we're doing something different. And I'm learning new techniques, and I'm excited about this. And this is a new way for me to do things. So it's, you got to give him credit for wanting to try something different, but I'm still always perplexed to this day about why they took it so hard. They were so not understanding. There had to be some internal strife that was going on at the time, and that was really creating some animosity. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of. And
even Benmont Tench will, when it comes up, he's played on one cut on the record. I think it was the Apartment song. He's still sour grapes about it. Like he'll say, they just asked me to come in and just bang on these chords, and I couldn't get it right. He's still even now he still complains about it. And then the same thing with Full Moon with Into the Great Wide Open. Same idea. They're still really sour grapes about it.
Again, a lot of it is ego. A lot of it, these guys think of themselves more a little bit more than just a session musician. Think about all the things that Benmont Tench has played on. He's played with Stevie Nicks on her solo records. He's played, he's done, a lot of different things. So these guys feel, well, I'm a great musician. Use me. I don't want to just play ding, ding, ding. And I, to a certain extent, I kind of understand that. But on the other hand, it's like, well, this is what they want for the song, so it's kind of that give and take. You're kind of on the fence. You don't know how to feel sometimes. This is a perfect example of that kind of thing where, what's better, the warm sounding, recording the band live thing or crafting a song one step at a time, one track at a time. And it's really good. It makes a perfect case for that kind of argument and that kind of discussion. So,
let me ask you, Chris, does this sound like this was crafted one track at a time, this album?
I never thought about it that way. I mean, in my head, I mean, like when I think about Full Moon Fever, like I said, like I'm probably, and I'm not saying this to be a wise guy, I'm probably a little bit younger than you guys. So Cloud,
not probably, you are. So I don't think you're guessing that.
So Cloud.
I mean, just
hey, Chris, I admire the effort, man.
Let's put it this way: if you're watching us on YouTube, it's quite obvious.
Yes, it is.
So anybody watching this, you'll know. But I digress.
But for me, like in my head, I always picture like Cloud 9 through Into the Great Wide Open as being all kind of a part of the same recording session. Because I remember when those records came out, and my dad and I getting them and listening to them, and then the first records I really remember having come out in my time and really listening to in a big bad way. And to me, they all kind of sound the same. Like, and I don't know and I'm not saying that in a negative way. They just all have the same tone and the same vibe. So it doesn't necessarily feel like they were recorded separately because they all have a similar tone.
If you didn't know, if you didn't know any better, you could put all this together and you could swear it could be from the same.
Yeah, it's
Full Moon Fever and Into the Great Wide Open to me are very similar in the sound. I mean, I don't know. You're not really getting, even on that album, the Heartbreakers as they usually are.
Yeah,
even on that record, it's
and that sounds different for a Heartbreakers record. So just to put that into perspective for Chris, I mean, I did a little bit of this chronology, but if we take it from let's take it from Traveling Wilburys, because that came out first. Well, Cloud 9 was 87,
right?
Traveling Wilburys 88. Mystery Girl 89, Full Moon Fever 89. Jeff Lynne's first solo album, Armchair Theater, comes out in 1990.
Yeah, that too.
Traveling Wilburys. No, Petty's on it a little bit. Traveling Wilburys Volume 3 comes out in 1990. Into the Great Wide Open comes out in July of 91. And then again, we need to talk about this. I just need to add this in. Is Del Shannon's Rock On comes out in October of 1991, because if you look, this was produced by Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, and Mike Campbell. Mm-hmm. And this was recorded in Mike Campbell's garage, and there's footage. So even though this
There
came
you
out
go.
this came out in 91 and Del Shannon passed away in 1990. So they were working on this in 1989. So all of this creativity, all this stuff was happening. Like you said, it's almost like one expanded box set. It's almost like all these artists were working together to almost like an MCU. Like they were all in this universe of making music
Yes.
together. And if you get this, like if you start with Cloud 9 and you get all the albums that Jeff Lynne worked on up until 91, you have like this almost this anthology of music that, like Chris says, kind of fits together. It doesn't sound the same, but there's DNA in there that kind of connects everything. There's threads that connect all of these records together. And I want people to, this is on Spotify now, so you should absolutely check out Rock On, because it's got the same,
Well, you'll definitely hear that Jeff Lynne's production. I mean, that's first and foremost.
He's got a sound for sure.
He's got a very particular sound. Even his own album, Armchair Theater, if you haven't heard it, Chris, I mean, you'll definitely once you hear that record, and Jeff plays pretty much everything on that record.
Except for drums, which are incredible. The drummer is incredible, Met Matheson.
Yeah,
she's
incredible.
but
it has the same drum sound.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, they all do.
Because of the way he mic'd the drums, that gated sort of sound that he establishes, that type of sound that is evident even with Stan Lynch. I mean, Stan Lynch's drums, he made him sound like the Jeff Lynne drum sound, which I'm sure did not sit well with Stan Lynch at all.
If you even go even further, you can hear it on those Beatle recordings from the early 90s too, on the anthology series.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Free as a Bird absolutely has that sound. All right, let's talk a little bit about the music now. I think we have to talk about the stuff, with all this drama. It's you'd almost think, wow, it's amazing that this even happened. We're talking a lot about the drama, but I don't think it interfered that much. It was just like sour grapes that was going on kind of outside of it. It didn't impede the recording of the album. The only thing that impeded the recording of the album was the Traveling Wilburys album that kind of came up first, and then they had to stop it. But I'll tell you, pound for pound, anytime I Won't Back Down comes on my Spotify randomly, I play it twice. It is, if we ever do an episode about songs that you play twice in a row, I Won't Back Down is hands down a double play for me every time. I love just that sound, the sound of that track kind of epitomizes the whole production, because it's got those thick, those great backing Jeff Lynne vocals that, and the first time you hear them, they're really thick and heavy on this. And because Free Fallin' is the first track, and it's a little more subdued. It's kind of, he comes in on Ventura Boulevard, the lyric Ventura Boulevard is the first time you really hear it. And you're like, wow, this is something different from him. But when you get to I Won't Back Down, you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the Mike Campbell kind of solo-y stuff, but then you've got the Jeff Lynne providing the backing vocals and providing the bass for it.
If I'm not mistaken, that track came later, didn't it? I mean, they recorded that late in the process. I think they needed one more song to kind of, there was some, I think they said there was something missing. They needed one, and you really listen to that song. That's the song that kind of really reminds me of like the Wilburys.
Yeah.
It has that vibe to it. You know what I mean? So it's just, even the video, which Ringo does not play on the song. He's in the video, and you think, wow, like that's a great. It's like you got half the Beatles there.
Yeah,
Jeff Lynne, and then it's Tom Petty. It's like that's pretty fucking good. You know what I mean? You can't get any better than that.
Yeah, Ringo will just show up for anything. Yeah, you didn't play drums in this, but you want to be in the video? Yeah,
sure.
You want him to. The spirit is there. So
yeah, you wanted him to play.
When I hear I Won't Back Down, that's fucking Ringo as far as I'm concerned, man. Why not?
Ringo just assumed, in Eric's mind, Ringo just assumed ownership of that.
There you go.
Performance, because I feel that way too, because I think of the video. I think of him playing in the video, and I'm like, it seems like a but it was the great Phil Jones. Phil Jones played drums on this album. He actually worked with the Heartbreakers. He did percussion in the past for them. But yeah, Phil Jones worked on this. Like I said, Phil Jones played drums on Del Shannon on Rock On. So all these people were in this collective community of people that were just working with each other. Chris, since you came to this, since you're younger than us, I guess you felt the need to say that. But since you are young, what tracks kind of what grabbed you about this? Because like I said, Eric and I were in the thick of it, and we were like living this stuff. We came hot off of hot off of Cloud Nine, and
Yeah.
and like I said, Brian Wilson's solo album, he was on that, and so Jeff Lynne was starting to like perk up and show up as a producer, but not a recording artist. So we were kind of like, okay, this is as good as it's going to get right now, but then all of a sudden he was everywhere. So we were like in the thick of this, loving it. So as someone who came to it later, I
came to it when it came out. Like I remember my old man having it and playing it all the time. And the song,
when you were like 2.
I was 10.
Okay.
Hey, 10's a good age, man. That's a good age too.
And the first music I grew up listening to was like, hair metal, like Bon Jovi and Poison and that kind of stuff. So for me, the track that stuck out when we would play this record in the car was always Running Down a Dream, with that really killer distorted riff, and the video with the cartoon and him riding around and stuff. And that was the one that always stuck out to me because I just always thought it was such a badass tune. It just, the lyrics and just the whole tone of the track was definitely up my alley.
I think I remember the first time we heard it, Dean. I think the first time you heard it was, I had the cassette and it was in your Camaro.
Yep.
We were on our way to
1978 Camaro.
I think it was Red Lobster. I think we were going out to dinner like that. And we just, we decided to, and I distinctly remember you hitting the rewind button after Running Down a Dream and just playing that again because it was just so fucking. I knew it because I had listened to it once, and I said Dean's gonna fucking love this record because the established Jeff Lynne sound. If you like Cloud Nine, if you love the Wilburys, you're gonna love this. So it was really cool to experience that together and to kind of that guitar solo, Mike Campbell, is one of the greatest. That should have been you know what, I should have put that on my list of great guitar solos. I mean, I when I think about it now, I'm like, wow, that was
especially for Mike Campbell. He's not known as a big solo guy. He's more of like an inserting phrases and stuff. But he brought the fire on that. That was a and like I said, the video with the cartoon with the guy with the cigar and
it took me forever.
Like
I
said,
like
I didn't know
who Del was as a kid.
This is who Del was. Their hero, and Del Shannon makes an appearance on the album. Oddly enough, he's on the album, but he's not on a song.
That interlude.
He's on Hello CD Listeners, which is an interlude at the end of side. If you have the record, if you have the record or the tape, right, you have to get up after side 1 is over and turn it over. CDs were kind of still a relatively new format, and at the end of side 1 on Full Moon Fever, which would be after Running Down a Dream, Tom Petty comes on with a public service announcement for CD listeners saying, "Hey, listen, we have to wait because the people that listen on tape or album have to get up or sit down and turn over the record and start it. So please just wait a moment, and here comes side 2." And there's all these weird noises in the background, and Del Shannon is the one making the weird noises. So he's in the mix too. But that's the tongue in cheek that makes this album so fun. Is kind of when you're listening to it, it's like, "Hello, CD listeners," and it's so deadpan and so like, just it's like, what the hell is this?
There's like chickens running around.
Yeah, especially because we had the cassette, so we didn't know, until we got the CD. It's like, what the hell is this on here? We were living with the flipping it over because we had the cassette and doing it. And that's just what makes it so endearing, is that, Tom Petty is just that kind of guy, he doesn't take himself too seriously, but he takes his music seriously and has fun doing it. And you can hear it.
It's the perfect album to, dare I say, I mean, it is the perfect album to kind of smoke out to. It has that vibe to it. You could definitely I'm sure there was a lot of that being passed around. And the Wilburys too. That spirit of that, just the spontaneity of these are not the best songs each of them have ever written. They're just having fun. You know what I mean?
And it fits.
The nonsensical lyrics that just piecing words together. And they just made a song out of that, and they did it, and it was great. Yeah, I just love that. I love the the sort of the atmosphere of that, and to try to recreate that with the Volume 3 record, I felt was a little forced.
Yep.
It might have been. I think Dean and I talk about this all the time, and it might have been the Bob Dylan album that Jeff Lynne never produced.
Yeah.
By he's the
Beverly
only
Wilburys,
member of
right?
the Wilburys that he didn't produce outside of that, and I feel like because Bob Dylan is so substantial on that record that might be it.
Yeah.
That might be the one you
I
could
never thought about that.
Yeah. And get back to Del Shannon too. They did do a cover of Runaway, which
the Wilburys did that,
which is amazing. I love that.
There's actually two versions of that. There's one that's got the traditional solo with like whatever keyboard, and then there's one with a guitar solo instead. So there's actually two kind of mixes of that. What about All Right for Now? Great great kind of slows it down, right? It's kind of on the second side, it's the most probably tender song that's on there, probably the most serious song.
Yep.
Because everything else is kind of, especially on side 2, is kind of a done for a lark, Zombie Zoo and the Apartment Song, and like Eric said, that they weren't trying to make a Sgt. Pepper.
Nope.
They were just trying to make an album that they wanted to, and it feels that loose. And that's what makes it easy. I put it on, I'm like, wow. I was like, this was 12 songs?
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it just rolls off.
It's very concise. Yeah. And I got to wonder if one of the things that contributed to that is that it's before the CD era really kind of kicked in and people decided they needed to fill up every record with like 74 minutes of music. Yeah. It's still got that like 60s and 70s vibe where it's, not overly long and you don't, and the songs are very tight too. Like it's almost like a punk record in that like the songs are only like 2 and 3 minutes each. Which is awesome.
It doesn't overstay its welcome. Like I said, and that's the genius of a pop craftsman like Jeff Lynne is he knows how to get these things done in 3 minutes, but give you a lot of ear candy, a lot of things to listen to. Like Eric said, with the beeps and the chirps and the little pops, like the things that you can't think of the song without it because he's so good at making things fit.
Fascinating. Yeah.
These things like all fit and they have a place. But he doesn't overdo it, but he knows exactly how to where to place them, so it makes sense, and that's the beauty, and that's why when I listened to it, I was like, wow, I was like, it's for me, it's still I still kind of in awe of it, even listening to it this many years later. If this was just so good, it was a moment in time when there was so many sparks of creativity happening in this one circle of people. And they were all benefiting from it. They were all just kind of capturing, like kind of, it was lightning in a bottle multiple times because you had it with Petty, you had it with George Harrison, you had it with Roy Orbison, you had it with the Wilburys. All these artists were just kind of like boom, 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 and everybody was kind of, kind of benefiting from it, which is amazing.
Well, and credit has to be given, obviously, to Jeff. Through all of this, he's the glue. That most definitely. He's the glue that did all this and established that sound for all of them. They all loved it, and they just kept coming back from it. Petty would come back for a third record, right? With Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, Highway Companion. Even after Wildflowers, he would return with Jeff and do that. Much more subdued. Really.
There's some great songs on that record.
It's not Full Moon Fever 2 because there is the. The Tom Petty influence of Wildflowers kind of toned that a little bit and kind of was able to color, and by that time, Jeff Lynne had also kind of pulled back his production style too. It wasn't that as shimmery as it used to be. So, what other songs, Chris? Besides Running Down a Dream.
If to me, like the first two cuts, obviously,
One-Two Punch,
Free Fallin', and I Won't Back Down. I mean, to open your record with two cuts like that are amazing. And those are the songs that, if I'm going to say that, remain in my rotation from this record, like when I'm making a playlist or if I'm listening to other things, those are the two songs I always come back to. And honestly, what was interesting for me is there's a box set that Tom Petty put out about, 10 years ago or so, called the Live Anthology. And it's like an anthology of like his live performances going back to the 70s up until I guess that point when the record came out. And there's two really amazing live versions of both of those. I mean, there's an amazing live version of each of those songs. Like, and I hadn't heard them in their full production in a long time. And it was really interesting to go back to. And, they're just, no matter how many times you hear them, those two songs never get old. So it's
especially when you know the story behind I Won't Back Down, right? Someone had burned down Tom Petty's house, tried to kill him.
Yep.
Like this was arson. It wasn't like a mistake, an accidental fire. Someone tried to they burnt his house down, like tried to, and he lost everything. And he had to take his wife and his kids like out on tour with him because they had nowhere to live. And I won't back down was the response to that, is like, you can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. This is not gonna stop me. So someone tried to kill him. This is like the nicest guy in the world. Why would you want to kill Tom Petty? I can give you a list of I can give you a list of a whole bunch of other people in rock and roll you might want to think about.
That's right.
Tom Petty would not even be near the top 500. I wouldn't even be thinking of Tom Petty.
And it's kind of a metaphor for his whole career, because I mean, he had that fight with MCA over record prices back in the early '80s, and fighting for his contracts and all that kind of stuff. And it really is. It might have been inspired by that moment, but it really is kind of a statement of who he is.
He was very outspoken and he stuck up for a lot of. He stuck up for Roger McGuinn, and because they were giving him a raw deal, and he was trying to get that ball rolling. Yeah, he was very tough. He was a tough. He was a bulldog when.
Yeah, no, he's not a pushover, but he's very genial. Like in his interviews, he's very genial and off the cuff and funny.
Yeah.
But he doesn't take anything when he thinks something is wrong or needs to be corrected. He's not afraid to stand up for his friends or go for it. So. Eric, what about you? What about this out? What songs are grabbing you besides that? We know the top stuff, but
yeah, I mean, I Won't Back Down is just definitely. I love. I mean, Free Falling's great, but come on, I'm a little tired of it. It's just it's the one you hear. You hear it every day. I mean, it's just one of those songs. But you can't understate the greatness of it. I've always been partial to Facing the Crowd because I love the simplicity of the chords in that song. And that's very Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, it's got that dobro guitar in it. That little flourish there, and it reminds me of the songs that he did with Roy Orbison. The slow stuff he did on Mystery Girl and that kind of thing. And it just, I love when Jeff gets quiet like that in his production, and it's so simple, but effective. And then there's little vocals that creep in, like the, during the song. And that makes the song, and like gives you chills. And it's just so simple. It's like, this is nothing. I remember when the video anthology came out on VHS, and I would, when we were working at Suncoast, I was in Florida. I would play that all the time, and luckily they had the stuff from Full Moon Fever on there. Facing the Crowd was like, I was like, oh, this is great, because I had never seen the video to Facing the Crowd up to that point. So it's like, man, this is cool. And I introduced it to some of the kids I was working with. Because they like Tom Petty a lot. It's like, yeah, who produced this? I gave him a little bit of an education about Jeff Lynne. And, oh, really? That guy? I'm like, yeah, that guy with the curly hair, and he worked with him, and I just go into the whole thing. But like Dean said before, we were all caught up in that. That was our in for the Beatles. That was our in for, because we loved ELO so much. A lot of gateways.
Lindsey Buckingham with Brian Wilson, and because we like those artists so much, that was where our love for the Beatles came from. Because I wasn't a huge Beatles fan before that. It was because of people like Jeff Lynne that got me into the Beatles. So it comes full circle.
Eric brought something up. We're going to let Chris in on this. I emailed Eric a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
Because I'd come across some new information. So here's the thing. We're going to talk about the Wilburys a little bit. So it is Tom Petty adjacent, but not really. When Roy Orbison died, right? Because Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne were working with Del Shannon. The rumor was they were going to ask Del Shannon to replace Roy Orbison in the Wilburys. That was always the thing. Yeah, that was always the story. It was like, oh, Del Shannon. It makes sense. He's a falsetto like Roy Orbison. He's a classic. He's from that era. Mm-hmm. He's a hero. It was always debunked. A couple of weeks ago, I came across an article that was confirmed by George Harrison's wife Olivia, that George Harrison had said, "I would like to have Lindsey Buckingham join the Traveling Wilburys. And I sent that nugget to Eric. I said, this is like, for me, earth shattering because my two favorite artists are Lindsey Buckingham and Jeff Lynne, and they are both cut from the same cloth. And what was, Eric, what was your response to that? Do you remember what you said?
I didn't see it. I just don't see, I could see him and Jeff like just button heads the whole like I could just, I mean, because they're just so much alike, and Lindsey's very difficult to work with anyway. I don't know.
I just a lot more sense than Lindsey Buckingham.
Yeah,
say that, but
you know what though? I was thinking about it today, but Lindsey Buckingham has like the folk music pedigree. He was a big fan of the Kingston Trio, and
right.
You know, there's that the what Eric's concern was and mine is like Lindsey Buckingham is a studio doctor also. He architects his music, and he does those same quirky he puts those same quirky things in. Into his solo music. So what would he have clashed, or would he have been able to fit in? Because the only band he's been in for his whole life pretty much was Fleetwood Mac, and that's the biggest dysfunctional thing ever. So would this have been a breath of fresh air, or would he have brought his ego and temperament, because he could be temperamental?
Well, you got to keep in mind too, though, like when Fleetwood Mac was going through their paces and all of that drama in the 70s and early 80s, he kind of always comes out in that part of the story as like being the guy that like kind of held it together. And so like if that's the case, like is he going to be the guy that kind of wants to orchestrate all the stuff in any band he's in? Because
probably he's a leader. Yeah, he's a natural leader. Yeah.
I mean, I could see that. I wish I was a fly on the wall for that. I think that's what I said. Is like
it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting had that come to pass.
But when I think back to some of the music that he did, I think Mirage might be the perfect album to kind of sell it.
Yeah.
And that could have been what George might have been listening to. I don't know, but when you think of, and even a lot of the B-sides that they were like Cool Water, with the cover of Cool Water, that would have been, I could see the Wilburys doing that, know.
Yeah, he could have, if he could keep himself in check, it would have been an interest. Of course we never got it, but that was just recent information. I mean, for years the legend was Del Shannon was the next one, and they had always debunked it. And then this, 30, 40 years later, all of a sudden we get this information that he was there. So this is a great album. This is going to be an easy listen. If you've never heard Full Moon Fever, I don't know where you've been, but get it on Spotify. It's a gorgeous sounding album. It's from the tail end of the 80s, but it is not the 80s production because again, it's almost like we're talking about Jeff Lynne, but Tom Petty knew what he wanted. He's looking for a different sound, and that's the moral of this story is Tom Petty striking out on his own and wanting to do something different, wanting his friends to be involved, but they just felt had an adverse reaction to it. But Tom Petty squarely is the centerpiece of this, like on Depending on You. I just, his vocals are really sharp on this album too. Like Petty, this album wasn't produced around Petty. I mean, Petty brings the vocals. He brings what is needed to this album. I really think he, that's the key is he was energized and into it, and his vocals drive every song. Even the goofy stuff, my middle name is Earl, and even those weird like he sells everything on this album.
You're So Bad is a great.
Yeah, You're So like
another one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a good tune.
Yeah, Petty is in it to win it on this because this was his passion project and it was his opportunity to make his own statement. And on every track you hear just the stuff that he's having fun with, the stuff that's weird, the stuff that's quirky. All Right for Now, which is just a really tender song.
That's a great tune.
He's able to go into that compartment and kind of be there, and it's just him and a guitar pretty much and some backing vocals. So he really rose to the occasion. I mean, he wrote or co-wrote all the songs. So this was him. It was him just finding the right conduit to present the package.
It's kind of interesting too, because the one thing I kept thinking about as I was listening to the album to prepare for this is that the track listing shouldn't make sense, but it does. Like I don't like Free Fallen doesn't seem to me like a natural opener where you go
Mhm.
from All Right for Now, which is like this tender, like almost lullaby, into
Yeah.
Zombie Zoo. It just
Mhm.
doesn't
Yeah.
fit. Where he's writing a song about seeing, they saw him and his, the Wilburys basically saw goths in a diner, and that's what the lyrics are about. From that lullaby, it shouldn't make sense, but it kind of does. Like it just that was
Yeah.
the thing that stood out to me, like listening to the record.
Yeah, All Right for Now is almost should be like the album closer. Like that should
Right,
be like
exactly.
probably like the last song. It kind of goes out gently, but it doesn't. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like All Right for Now. Then you got a mind with a heart of its own. Then Zombies. So you have two more up tempo songs that kind of close it out. Yeah, I don't know how I think any arrangement. You know what it is? I think the first side is more of the straightforward stuff, and the second side is the quirk. It's kind of
Right.
you really the first side is kind of really bringing you like a really well presented set of tracks, and then side two is like the fun stuff, like running down a dream closes out side two,
Right.
and he opens side two with it closes out side one. He opens side two with a cover, Feel a
And
Whole Lot Better from the Byrds, and then
and
it's just like fun, it's weird stuff.
and for me, like if I were to like if I kept coming back to it, my one criticism of the record, if I had to like find one like thing to be negative
Be
about,
be careful. Watch your step. Right now, you're like Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, and you have the Word of God. And if
right?
you don't spell it right, you're gonna fall through.
So 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 I get the Jim McGuinn influence, or excuse me, Roger McGuinn. He changed his name to
Yep.
Jim and then went back to Roger. I get the Roger McGuinn influence, and I get like how the Byrds and are such a huge influence on Petty and the Heartbreakers. It's just like a straight cover, and the
Yeah.
Byrds version of the song is already so amazing. Like, why would you waste an album track on that?
Doing
Whereas
it. Yeah.
if you look at the two B sides, he actually put out one of the B sides is on an anthology. It's I think it's called "Don't Treat Me." I can't think of the name of it, but like he had two B sides that were like so much better than just doing a straight Birds cover. Like I would have thought that album space would have been better served by one of the songs he uses as a B side.
Okay. That's good. You're fine. You're fine. You made it through. You made it to the other side.
Yeah.
The penitent man will pass. Penitent man will pass. We went off a little. Hey, around the same time, Eric, right?
Yeah, it did.
Last Crusade was what, 89? So
89 it was.
There you go.
It was time. The reference was timely too when this was going on.
Yep.
Yeah. What else? My notes. I wrote Stan Lynch was a baby.
Yeah.
So that we kind of talked about that. He was acting real childish, and it got to the point at the end where Stan Lynch wasn't even showing up for something. I think it's in the documentary, and Tom Petty's like, "Yeah, we'll just call Ringo." He said he'll do it, and then Stan's like, "Oh, okay, I'll come and do it." Like there was some gig that they were supposed to do like a promotional thing, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not coming." He's like, "All right, Ringo said he'll do it." And then Stan Lynch's like, oh, "Okay, I'll be there." So, the animosity just kind of grew. Howie Epstein would pass away from drug addiction. So there was some rough times on the horizon, but they did come out stronger for it. Like I said, even though like Into the Great Wide Open was probably one of the biggest Heartbreakers selling albums and the one that they hated, but they persevered. It didn't. That's something that could have broke the band, especially having Full Moon Fever right before it, and the bad feelings they had about that. To then go into an album working with the person that you did not agree with for the solo album, they could have and should have probably exploded after that point, but they didn't. They actually kind of tightened up and kept going, and then the notion of Tom Petty solo albums became a thing. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do Wildflowers, going to do some other stuff. It became like, yeah, this is how it's going to be.
And it's such an interesting contrast to see how all the Heartbreakers who played on Wildflowers feel about Wildflowers versus like the Jeff Lynne records. It's like it's such a dichotomy, and that they talk about such a positive experience. And I mean, if you think about Jeff Lynne as a producer and Rick Rubin as a producer, their styles are so different.
Yeah, it's a matter of methods. You're right. We talked about this. We talked about Rick Rubin in the Pyromania episode too. It's a matter of methods, and the Heartbreakers are comfortable when they're all in a room, all playing together, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's their collab, and I think that's when they feel they've got a collaborative spirit because they can put their, kind of do different things there, and they're not given marching orders. Both of those techniques work. It's just horses for courses. It's what people prefer and how they want to achieve something. And both of those, right? And Eric will laud Wildflowers till the cows come home, because it's got a particular sound, that's got a particular sound to it. And this does too. And they both were equally like successful for different reasons, so so there's something to be said for that. And we'll even go as far as Regina Spektor, who came to prominence in the mid 2000s and 2010s. And for one of her albums, she said, she goes, I want the guy. She goes, I don't know who he is. He goes, but whoever produced Full Moon Fever, I want to work with him. So, and she didn't even know who it was. And, for her. And so I forget what album was called. It wasn't called Blue. I forget what it was called. So Regina Spektor's like, I want the guy from Full Moon Fever, whoever that was, because I remember listening to that when I was a kid or whatever, and I want to work with that person. So Jeff Lynne, you say, what was the ripple effect? He ended up producing a couple of tracks for Regina Spektor, who was a really quirky artist, but he ended up working with her for a couple of things because of Full Moon Fever. It was like, so many people grew up listening to that. And again, I think they benefited from MTV too. Tom Petty, like you said, that free falling video with the guys on the skateboards and the girl on the skateboard. I mean, that video was on all the time.
Oh my God.
That was just like the summer. That was just like the summer of '89 song. It was like a perfect, like it hit like at the perfect time, and it was just, like I said, just ripe for overplaying on MTV because like I said in the beginning, these singles didn't do that great, 12, 23, Free Fall and hit number 7, Facing a Crowd 46. They weren't ripping up the charts, but it's that MTV effect again too, of just kind of having that out there and then people going to grab the music as a result.
Yep.
So,
and it's one of those albums. It's like a great driving album.
Yeah.
It's one of the albums I could put on in the car and not bother my wife. Like even she's in television. So.
Not King Crimson again, Chris.
No,
come on.
I wouldn't get away with that. But the other day, we drove out to go see her family on the island, and like everybody's singing along, even my kids, they know the songs and stuff. Like it's just one of those records that everybody can rock out to. There's something for everybody on it for sure.
Yeah, this, and then you follow up this with Dark Side of the Moon Redux by Roger Waters. And
no, thank you.
That's what's called a room clearing album.
Oh my God, so awful. Oh, it's bad.
Look at Eric's face. It's just his eyes are just like.
Oh, I will
never. Drawing a mustache on the Mona Lisa.
I know somebody else said this, but I will never get that. However fucking long it took to listen to that. I will not get that time back.
You don't get it
actually
back.
To the whole thing?
I did too.
Oh my God, I couldn't get through this one single. I'm like, this is a bad Tom Waits impression. That's what I thought the whole time.
Yeah. I mustered through it too because people were so excited about it. But anyway. That's a whole other. We got to do albums that should not have been made, right? We'll do it.
Gabriel's new album is amazing.
I heard it's fantastic. Yeah,
I.O. is fantastic. He just dropped.
On the flip side,
last single today actually was the 12th track, and now it comes out in a couple of days, December 1st. The entire album. I'm excited. I didn't really listen to all the tracks because I want to experience it. And I'm going to get both. I'm going to get both the Dark Side mix and the Bright Side mix because he did 2 different mixes with 2 different engineers. So
that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Yeah, there's a couple of tracks where I'm kind of like I like the Dark Side because it's a little bit more straightforward. The Bright Side is more more polished, but there are a couple of tracks that benefit from that polish. So it's a very interesting listen.
That you get to make your own mix of it then too. You can kind of do it on Spotify and kind of pick the ones you like. So see, there's an artist that's still doing it the correct way, not like what's his face from Pink. It used to be with Pink Floyd. I don't know. He's Grumpy, whatever his name is. Grumpy.
Bad.
So anyway, we went off on a little tangent, but that's all right. You know what? Check this album out. This is an actual original version release, not the re-release. I did see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers on this tour at Nassau Coliseum in July of 1990. I was one of the, I'm famously known as the guy that they give the ticket to when people back out. And I filled that position gladly for this. I was like, for some reason, I'm like, I hope maybe Ringo will show up or maybe someone will show up.
Come on. You wanted Jeff to come out on stage.
Well, at that time he was
Ringo.
At that time he was in the
somewhere. It happened in New York, right?
Yeah, at that time, Jeff Lynne was in the back to tank. He was not making public appearances. He was just in the studio. Like he was just like, he was kind of building his strength up for his reemergence 25 years later after this.
Right.
But yeah, check this out. Go ahead.
Speaking of releases, can you, I can't wrap my head around, like I've read it like 3 times in the last week that somebody at MCA said this wasn't a releasable album. Like they, until Irving Azoff got involved, they weren't going to release the record. Like I still don't understand the disconnect. Like that's the thing I couldn't get. Like, really, why?
It's a good question. Maybe because of the lackluster sales of Let Me Up, I've Had Enough.
Or it didn't sound like enough like the Heartbreakers.
Maybe they thought they peaked with Southern accents was kind of like the high watermark for Tom Petty, and then right after that they put out a live album, Pack Up the Plantation, and then they went on tour, they backing Dylan,
yeah,
and then they come out and put Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, which didn't do really what it was supposed to do. So maybe
Long After Dark didn't do much. I mean, Southern Accents was after that. Right?
It was after that. So yeah, and that was kind of like Don't Come Around Here Anymore, had Rebels on it. I mean, it sold pretty well for them, but then Let Me Up, I've Had Enough was just a dog. So maybe, and maybe with all the trouble, maybe Tom Petty being such a troublemaker, they're like, this, he seems like he's on the downslide.
Right.
And even some of the reviews, just to tie this up, even some of the reviews at the time is like, why is Tom Petty working with these why is he trying to rush himself into retirement? Because at the time, anybody over 40 in rock and roll was old. So he's like, why is he so desperate to push himself into retirement and working with Roy Orbison and Bob Dylan, and how wrong they were, because like we had said in other episodes, the Stones are 80 and they're still rocking. Back then,
Dylan's still
going.
Sponsored by AARP.
Yeah. So back then when you were 40, you were already ready to be put out to pasture, and they were questioning why is he working with these people that are ready for the retirement home. So yeah, there might not have, Chris, I think there might not have just been a lot of confidence in Petty. Like they might have thought, well, here's now he's on the downslope.
Yeah.
And what, the guy makes a lot of trouble for us. He, puts us through the ringer. I think he sued him a couple times, MCA. So
yeah,
they're probably like, what's the point? Why should we?
Right.
But they, thank God for Irving Azoff then, because, like you said, there were so many, I love the way you put it, just to close up, that there's so many ripple effects.
Yeah,
from this, or just from what was going on in, like I said, in this time. I think everybody should check out our Wilburys episode, because we really we cover some of the same territory, but that's because there was so much great stuff that was happening at this time. So, any closing comments, Chris?
I'm glad you guys asked me to do this record, because it's essentially a greatest hits album, and I came back to it and I hadn't listened to it in a while, and I really kind of fell in love with it all over again. So I was glad to be able to do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had you on because we had to lower the average age of the host, because as you pointed out, we are a little bit older. So when I did the math, I figured out your age, and we did the math, and it lowered the average age for this episode. So we wanted to have you on, just
cool.
Mainly for that. Eric, anything in closing?
I'm just glad that we got around to it. I think when it closes the
book on Tom Petty.
Closes the book on Jeff Lynne, in that we kind of covered like that entire spectrum. We Wilburys, Flaming Pie, and Paul McCartney was an episode that we did as well.
So we did Flaming Pie. Yeah.
But
maybe we do Brian Wilson's solo album, but that was just a hodgepodge.
Well, here's one more thing I'm going to throw out there to you guys, and we didn't really talk about it, Dean. But what do you guys think of Now and Then?
I like it, honestly. I thought it was cool. My daughter's a Beatles fan, and so she constantly is asking me to play it in the car, so I'm listening to it all the time. And I think it's really, I love the string arrangements on it. I like the solo that McCartney lays down that's got that George Harrison vibe to it. I don't know. I personally really dug it. I thought it was kind of if that's really the last Beatles song, I think it's a cool epitaph. I know there are some people that are very critical of it, but I really do enjoy it.
Eric, you didn't dig it?
It's too overproduced for me.
Overproduced?
Yeah. And why didn't they invite Jeff Lynne back? That's the reason I brought it up, is because he started it, and I felt like
Peter Jackson finished it. That's really what it was. Is Jeff Lynne started the ball rolling, and he did something unheard of at the time, but he could not, the technology was not there to do it for Now and Then. And what Peter Jackson did for Get Back, right? He was able to, for the Get Back documentary, he was able to isolate conversations and music. Right. He was able to, his technology was able to do that. And actually in the Jeff Lynne documentary, Mr. Blue Sky, Paul McCartney says, I should actually get, this was like 6 years ago. He's like, I should get Jeff and, grab Jeff and finish it off. So Paul McCartney, it was always in his mind.
He's always wanted
to finish. Finish Now and Then. Like for him, it was, and I've posted the clip on our group page on Facebook too, of McCartney talking about how George Harrison said, this is crap, it's rubbish. But McCartney had always wanted to finish it. And he said, I'm going to grab Jeff and finish it off.
Did Harrison say it was crap because they couldn't pull the tape apart, or did he say it was crap just because he thought the song was crap?
I think he thought the song was crap. I got the impression he thought the song just wasn't that great.
Okay.
And again, maybe at the time for what they were working with, they probably couldn't make it into something.
No, they definitely could. They couldn't pull the piano off.
It just feels more a very tender song, and I just feel like Paul is kind of coming in and saying, "Oh, I'm putting the final period on the end of the Beatles," and I felt like they did that already with "Free as a Bird" and the anthology, and that should have left it at that. And the fact that George isn't here. They only used what was put down, and it wasn't much. George laid down some rhythm guitar, and that was about it.
Yeah. Right.
So for me, it didn't feel like a proper Beatles recording. It's just bits and pieces. They even had to use harmonies from established songs because the harmony, he can't harmonize with Ringo.
Yeah.
There's nobody there to harmonize with at this point. They're just kind of like laying their vocals on top, and it just sounded sloppy to me. They sounded very much their age. It's just old Ringo and old Paul singing over, what could be like a really nice. And you think about "Free as a Bird," and man, those harmonies are killer.
Yeah, that's a good tune.
Like they really make the song, and I don't know. I just feel like it.
It grew for me. It grew on me. At
first I was like, I like it. I will say that.
But the music video is too creepy. So don't if you haven't seen the music video.
I like the music video.
The documentary for how it's made, I really dug. I thought the documentary for how they made it was a cool.
Yeah, it's just creepy with the like the young John Lennon. He's like dancing around when they're conducting, and I'm like, this is like Peter. It was for me that was a bridge too far with Peter Jackson of. Because you have old Ringo and old Paul next to young George in his Sgt. Pepper uniform and young John. I'm like, that was to me was the most that was contrived.
Right.
I was like,
well, I mean,
do something else.
Fab, you got George, dressed in the outfit, and there's little subliminal
tongue in cheek. This was weird. It was creepy because they were trying to put the Beatles back together. I'm like, The song itself though has grown on me. I was like, but it's like, it's okay. It's good. It's, this is it. It's the final one.
I mean, if there's one silver lining, like, I don't know if one has anything to do with the other, but the fact that they re-released the Red and the Blue albums and put them through
those are amazing.
Put them through the Giles Martin filter. I mean, the versions of Lion the Walrus and Magical Mystery Tour are to die for. They're amazing.
Oh my God. Even the older tracks I'm excited about. Like the Red,
and Ringo really benefited.
Hadn't been. Good Lord, they sound gorgeous. The stuff from Rubber Soul, sounds amazing. Yeah,
and just the way Ringo's drums are kind of like more up front than they were. It really is. It's amazing what Giles Martin's been able to do.
All right, cool. So everybody, you got a little bonus mini episode about Now and Then, which is very timely. So, and it's related. So cool. That's great. That's gonna do it for this episode. Definitely check out Full Moon Fever. It's from a magical time in music. A period of great creativity and spontaneity and camaraderie. All these great artists just working together. And again, they were doing it for the goof and for the fun. That doesn't mean that the music is goofy or to be taken less seriously. It actually makes it that much better because they're so loose. So as you see, we've gushed about it, and we'll give the final Jeff Lynne bell for this episode. And that's going to do it for this episode. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
Great having you back, and you will
back.
you will be back again, one way or the other, either in a music or a movie capacity, of course.
Anytime.
Cool, great deal. And of course, for Eric, this has been Dean. And like Tom Petty said, hello, CD listeners. You're going to have to flip it over, and we'll see you on the flip side.